نسخاي تموتي نسخاندوي تموتي أي تموتي أي تموتي نسخاي تموتي نسخاندوي تموتي سماي نبو عبيدو سالا سربخ مريت كالأسيدو سالا زارخا دخاي تسأمعو سالا دمسخ صحاي الأخيلا سالا حيلخا أمباسادري له سميكا تودي أمباسادري له نقيرنا عادي أمباسادر أمنات سخا 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 سخالو أمباسادري له سميك زياداي كابتن قطروبا تفلفلي أماي عين ماي بعلخي سخي 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 سخالو عالم كلاني إساي تعبي تنكل كله زوريا ملو كبي كم عف سلام سمايات تزمبي عالم كلاني نحنا إذا بيزانا يزفون ناي بوليتيكا تقامر تخنكون فقادنياتا تايتنا ناي جزانا تسنا قويتات كنكوني ناندنا سورانا هقراوي ديمقراسياوي سوراي ناتنا ديمقراسياوي قوامن بروغرامن زلنا اتحادن ناي موداتن علامانا دما حزبنا بمعرنتن فتن زنبرلا ناصام لولاويتن ኤርትራ መስራት ራይ ስለዚህ نحنا ምንቲ ምጽወታን ተካወን ይልና ኣብ እግሩ ዝኮነ ይሁን ወገን አይንም ብርከፍና نحنا ነፍስና ትመስል እንበር መተካታ ናይ ዝኮነ ወገን ትመስል አይንደልኒና ቃልቲ ዝመረረን ተመረረ ዝነውሐን ተነውሐ ኣብ መጨረሽታ ዓወትና ግድን برهان كدمدنه برهان كدمدنه دخا دخا
urban and rural areas of the region are benefiting from improvement of services in health,
education. أي تموتي نسخاي تموتي نسخاندوي تموتي أي تموتي تاجقناي تموتي نسخاندوي تموتي سماي نبو عبيدو سالا سربخا مريت تالأسيلو سالا زارخا دهاي تسأمعو سالا دمسخا
Audience of experts. Some will disagree that you cannot change regimes from the air by himself, the self-appointed Caliph Baghdadi. And so the destruction of, yes, madam.
Thank you for having me. My name is Saba Gebregiorgis. I am an Eritrean British. I would like to say thank you to you, Mr. Galloway. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge and to tell the audience that you came to Eritrea in the 1980s and you were one of the few Westerns who highlighted our armed struggle for liberation, and the Eritrean people are grateful for that. I hope you visit Eritrea and see what's happening.
More than 30 years ago.
Thank you. With regards to migration, it's something that's close to my heart, of course. A lot of Eritreans are coming to Europe through Libya. The gentleman talked about Libya being unable to cope with it, needing Western support. I would very much oppose his views. Actually, people are escaping from the Horn of Africa and from other African countries because of the neoliberal ravaged economies, because of the manufactured poverty, the crushing poverty that they have had to endure for decades, maybe hundreds of years. This is not a divine poverty, it's a manufactured poverty. And talking about Eritrea in the Horn of Africa, there is a kind of latent conflict between Ethiopia and Eritrea, a border conflict that was manufactured again by the same powers. This border conflict was resolved. Both countries went to arbitration, and the arbitration court gave the flashdown point to Eritrea, and it was legally settled. And they were supposed to implement it because it was a binding agreement. Ethiopia refused to respect it. It still occupies Eritrea's sovereign territory. It's got about 300,000 armies there. But the guarantors, the EU, the US, the UN, and the African Union, a toothless organization, you may say, but these were the guarantors of the agreement. They were supposed to impose sanctions on the party that refused to honor the decision. Ethiopia is in violation of international law, and it's doing so under the nodding approval of the US administration and EU, especially Britain and France. Now, if Ethiopia were compelled to leave Eritrea, we would have a peaceful Horn of Africa, a truly synergistic relationship between the governments, and the area is rich enough to grow economically, and people wouldn't migrate to begin with from their countries. So they're leaving their countries because of economic reasons, and not even political reasons in the case of Eritrea. Because Eritrea now is being sanctioned as well by the UN Security Council under the auspice of US. The sanctions have no base. Even the body that they put in place to oversee, to investigate the reasons for the sanctions has come up with no justification for them, but they're still in place, creating havoc on the economy of Eritrea. Now, this creates an economic stagnation from which people would want to escape. It's natural. People from Western Europe, from countries like Spain, are migrating to other Western Europe countries because economies, that's what human beings do. They move from place to place when economies fail. So the root cause is not understood. I mean, the debate in regards to migration here in the UK is so skewed. It's so devoid of context and history that people have a completely unrealistic understanding of it. And so they see these people coming through boats. They're Africans, they're migrants, they're after our jobs, they're going to do this and do that, and we have to stop them, and all sorts of madness. Actually, the root cause needs to be understood, and something needs to be done about that. Instead of the powerful countries holding the region, the Horn of Africa, where I come from, hostage of a no peace, no war situation by propping up dictators. Ethiopia and Djibouti, for example, are satellite states which are providing a lot of stuff for the US. I mean, Djibouti is essentially a colony of French, as you know, George. So we have really dictators who are working against the best interest of their region, turning the whole region into a region that's riddled with havoc. And that's what's happening. That needs to be understood.
Well, I think a lot more people will understand it after your contribution than did before you spoke. That's as good a contribution as has ever been made on this show, Kalima Horra. I've been in this issue for so long that I remember that the current pro-Western US satellite state in Ethiopia, its government, its party, its ruling party, when I first knew them, were pro-Albanian Maoists. The Tigray People's Liberation Front used to send me Christmas cards adorned by Chairman Mao Zedong's portrait. Now they are American puppets and are used in the region. So if you stand by the banks of the river for long enough, you see many things float by. But the people who are floating by in the Mediterranean are real people. And making drone attacks on their boats is certainly not going to solve this problem. As you rightly say, this problem is rooted in the context of war and exploitation and occupation throughout, in this case, Africa, but there are many other cases. The Rohingya people, for example, are pouring in their thousands into the holds of ships and dying a watery death, being driven by violence, anti-Muslim violence, out of Burma, for example, with Burma declaring that they are nothing to do with them and sending them out to sea where no one else will take them, and there they perish, other than those just found in a mass grave in Malaysia. So the imperial footprint and the interference of the powers in all of these theaters is very clear to see. Individual in Britain can be persuaded of that. Yes, madam, did you want to come back in?
I'm afraid, George, the level of indoctrination has got fever pitch here, that people just ignore the elementary facts that contribute to these things. It is sad beyond belief. As an Eritrean, it breaks my heart. Eritreans are incredibly resilient, incredibly determined people to build their country. We have a national service that's gone beyond what was supposed to be because we have an occupation going on. We have an army ready to invade us. So the Eritrean government, for example, instead of being held hostage to this crisis, it has mobilized its human resources, its capacity to build the country. And I'm sure you don't hear about this, but there was so-called Millennium Development Goals that was designed by the UN. Eritrea is one of those countries who has met it. Despite the challenge it faces, it has nearly eliminated malaria, which is endemic in the sub-Saharan country. It has the illiteracy level among school kids is really low. It has increased primary access to children, immunization. It has reduced maternal mortality and child mortality, and it's building its infrastructure. It's doing wonders in terms of water preservation, for example. You will never hear these things in the Western media about Eritrea, because as far as the West is concerned, they have to create a perception among the public that this is a dictatorial regime, this is anti-democracy, and then they deploy the human rights agents, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, to do their dirty work. There is a revolving doors between the policymakers and these humanitarian organizations, and then they impose sanctions on you, and then they ignore international law in terms of the occupation of Ethiopia that I spoke about. All this will create crisis. People then leave for better life. But this is not going to be understood in here, and I'm frustrated because I don't know how to debunk the narrative, the false narrative that exists in here.
Well, you've done a great job of it tonight, I must say. Let's hear from the young gentleman beside you.
Yeah.
This is going to lead us deeper and deeper into trouble.
Thank you.
La shukra ala wajib. Yes, madam. Last word, I think, to you.
I think we're talking about the solution. For me, if I can just mention why Eritrea is in trouble, I know I bring back the debate to Eritrea because I am Eritrean. Eritrea, in the global order where everyone is supposed to be on the line of the Washington, London, Paris consensus, Eritrea represents an anomaly, an atypical entity that needs to be punished. Why? Because it rejects aid and all its manifestations.
And to lead the great mission to build free societies on every continent. To understand such an epic lie is to understand history, hidden history, suppressed history, History that explains why we in the West know a lot about the crimes of others, but almost nothing about our own. The missing word is empire. The existence of an American empire is rarely acknowledged, or it's smothered in displays of jingoism that celebrate war, and an arrogance that says no country has a right to go its own way unless that way coincides with the interests of the United States.
It wants aid to be self-limiting, but that's not, we know the aid agenda, what the aid agenda is. It rejects militarism, like AFRICOM, for example. Eritrea and Zimbabwe at least are, I think, only two countries in Africa that haven't accepted AFRICOM. AFRICOM is the United States military command in Africa. It doesn't occupy any kind of military base, but it systematically incorporates itself into countries' military, becoming systemic presence without making itself noticed. It opposes neoliberalism with all its fanfare. It opposes the IMF strangulation of economies. It opposes the World Trade Organization that manufactures poverty, as I said, through its several policies. It wants to engage with countries on a bilateral, on a mutualistic basis. It wants to chart its own destiny, and that is a cardinal sin as far as the West is concerned. Now, the solution is very much what the Latin Americas are doing. You know, they have a very good synergistic relationship. So much so now the unthinkable is being contemplated in a sense. United States is talking about removing the embargo, the half-a-century-old embargo on Russia. Whether it materializes or on Cuba, whether it materializes or not, it remains to be seen. But the very fact that it is being contemplated by itself shows you who really has been isolated in that part of the world. So I wish we can replicate that in the Horn of Africa with symbiotic governments working for the betterment of the people. I think in the end it's consciousness of people, education of people, understanding what the basic democratic rights are without the elections and democracy fanfare that comes from the West that really doesn't materialize to anything tangible. So we need to inform ourselves.
Well, it's clearly about time I made another visit to Eritrea. 30 years. 30 years is too long.